Well, you're now on the channel. I'm a big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's time again for another Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters as SCPs episode. Let's bring these illustrations to life. Imagine, if you will, you are travelling through a thick forest, much like that you'd find in the Amazon. You travel for days with your team. You are on an expedition. After what seemed like an eternity in the humid heat, you stumble across an old ruin covered in moss and vines. You look at the stone statues as you investigate the carvings on some of the statues that are outside the front of what appears to be a temple. A very old temple that seems to be thousands of years old, perhaps even older. As you start to explore with the rest of your team, you notice a strange set of hieroglyphics running along the entrance of the temple. The broken statues of what look like warriors outside had a strange semblance to panthers. You dismiss this to be a statue of a warrior wearing some kind of headdress, as many cultures had over the centuries, most notably the Egyptians with statues of their many gods. Perhaps this was in honor of some kind of panther deity worshipped by this ancient tribe. Either way, you make your way into the temple, slowly studying the markings on the wall. They depict some kind of ancient creature that looked like a panther but stood upright, as if it was human. Once again, you dismiss this based on your knowledge of other cultures. Several members of the expedition team head further into the dark passageway, where you stay and begin to decipher some of the basic meaning of the symbols in front of you. You cannot be sure, but it seems that part of the markings refer to the sacrifice of multiple people to this panther-like creature. The images disturb you slightly, as you seem to be mesmerized. Little by little, you have a rather unsettling thought. As you continue reading, driven by some unknown force to head further into the temple, you start to notice the colour of the markings change over time. They went from a grey stone colour to red, an all too familiar red. The same colour as blood. That's right, the deeper into the temple you went, the more clear in your mind it became. The symbols on the wall were written in blood. It must have been worn away from the open entrance, but now you are here you can see it clearly, the story of what was being told in these ancient markings. It was indeed a tale of sacrificing humans to this panther-like god. Maybe not a god, but something thought to be a deity. However, this was far from your mind as you realize you have been separated from the rest of your team. You are alone in a long corridor with very little light, except from the light of your torch, a torch you have no memory of getting out. All of a sudden you hear a terrifying sound, one that sends a shiver down your spine. You look around you to see no one there, before hearing the sound again. This time, you can make out the direction it came from. Although filled with fear after hearing this scream that sent chills down your spine, you head down the corridor further into the temple. Curiosity had gotten the better of you. As you reach the end of the corridor, you see a large room with a light coming from a single spot on the floor. As you get closer, you step in something slippery, yet slightly sticky. You look down towards your feet and see the red colour of a pool of blood surrounding you. Shaking in terror, you slowly raise your head to see the mauled body of a member of your expedition team, lying on the ground in front of you. You then realize the light was coming from their torch. As you look around the room for the other member, there is no trace of them. Your focus comes back and you notice the second light in the corner of your eye. You look towards the light, expecting to see the mutilated body of your other companion, except there was nothing. You look around the room, and other than a large panther statue with what looked to be blood on it, you find you are alone. You don't know it yet, but you've just come face to face with SCP-Y-5044, Panther Warrior. This SCP takes on the form of a regular statue, one that seems like any other statue unless you see it while in a group. For you see, SCP-Y-5044 has a rather unique and terrifying ability. When viewing this SCP alone, you will only see a panther humanoid statue. However, if you were to view this statue in person with one or more people around you, SCP-Y-5044 comes to life and exhibits a rather strange and unique ability. The Foundation has discovered through tests with numerous D-Class personnel that SCP-Y-5044 can only come to life if one or more people are present in front of it in a room. Furthermore, SCP-Y-5044's first ability is one that has the scientists at the Foundation puzzled. To this day, they are still scratching their heads. For you see, when SCP-Y-5044 comes to life, one of the people in the room will just disappear, only leaving behind a single item that they were carrying. It is believed that this disappearance is a trigger of equivalent exchange for SCP-Y-5044 to change from a stone statue to a living panther warrior that is just as swift and ferocious as any jungle beast. The second and final ability of SCP-Y-5044 is that once it has killed the last remaining person from the group, it will return to what appears to be a regular stone statue, often covered in the blood of its victims, until several more unknowing prey come across its path. Due to this, the SCP Foundation has put strict rules in place for handling SCP-Y-5044. First, only one member of staff is allowed in the containment cell with this SCP at any given time, unless of course during testing and only after gaining approval of the O5 Council to perform such tests. Due to this, the classification of SCP-Y-0544 is currently safe. However, if containment is breached, SCP-Y-5044 will instantly be raised to Euclid classification. If somehow this SCP were to make it into a heavily populated area, the results would be devastating indeed. It started like any other day. Jason Blake was walking through a park on his way to work, a regular part of his routine. However, unlike other times, today was far from normal. As Jason walked through the park, he noticed a rather attractive woman with long red hair. She seemed lost and confused. He walked over to the woman and asked if she was all right. She turned to him and said she had lost her 3 companions, her 3 pet dogs, and asked if he would help her look for them. Jason knew that he had to get to work, otherwise he would be late. However, despite this, he felt compelled to help the woman look for her missing pets. After asking her where she saw them last and where she had been with them, Jason suggested they retrace her steps and see if there are any signs of the dogs. Jason and the woman walked towards the side of the park where she came from. As they continued, Jason was surprised as he did not seem to recognize the area around them. It still looked like the park, with green trees and grass, but he was confused why he'd never noticed this part before. He was known as a very observant person. However, this area seemed to have missed his notice. As they continued, the woman let out a shout of joy and pointed in excitement. As Jason looked to where she was pointing, he could see a small black dog on a park bench, led there curled up without a care in the world. The woman walked over and greeted the dog. She picked it up and walked back to Jason. He felt a small sense of happiness wash over him, pleased to see the woman reunited with one of her missing pets. Jason looked at the dog, and as he did, he noticed a collar with the name Fangen. It sounded German, although he had no idea what it meant. He didn't recall the woman having an accent of any form. Perhaps it was just the name she liked, or the name of the dog when she got it. Filled with determination to help her find the remaining dogs, Jason and the woman continued to look around the park, until they heard a noise from behind the bushes. Upon investigating, Jason found the second missing pet. This time, it was a light brown dog. Again, the woman went over and greeted her missing companion, her face now filled with excitement and an infectious sense of joy as she brought the dog over and introduced it to Jason. Again, Jason spotted a collar on the dog, but this time the name was Lavushka. A bit confused at the fact this dog's name sounded Russian and the previous one sounded German, he started to get curious about what the name of the third and final missing companion was. Perhaps it too had a unique and interesting name. Or perhaps it would have an ordinary name like Bob or Susan. He chuckled to himself as he continued with the woman in search of the final missing pet. Without realizing it, several hours had passed and Jason, who was now solely focused on the task of finding the last companion for the woman, had completely forgotten about his work. In fact, he had forgotten about everything else and had almost searched the entire park. Just then, as he turned to the woman and said he thinks they might not be able to find the last dog, Jason heard a small faint bark coming from behind him. He turned around and looked towards his feet to see, standing there, with a rather innocent and dumbfounded look on its face, a dog. This time, it was blonde in colour, with a similar collar to the other two. Jason picked the dog up and looked at the collar to see the name Shen Tian, which was another strange name that Jason seemed to dismiss, thinking the young red-haired woman liked to give her pets rather unique names. As he turned to her, Jason was overcome by a sense of accomplishment before the woman turned to him and asked him to pick one of the dogs. He was confused. Weren't these her beloved companions, which they spent hours finding in the park? Why was she asking him to choose one of them? Slightly confused, it seemed that the woman was not going to give up until he made a selection. He pointed to Fangen, the first dog they found. All of a sudden, the dog looked at him. His eyes started to glow red before he was gone, vanished in thin air without any trace. With that, the red-haired woman changed into what resembled a demon. A set of horns grew out of the top of her head, large wings on her back, and a dragon-like tail from the base of her spine. This unfortunate man I just had a run-in with SCP-Y-8021, a rather innocent-looking SCP to those who come across her, but with a rather sinister hidden motive. SCP-Y-8021 is a demonic female that can resemble an ordinary woman. However, the one common trait is they all have red hair and seem to have lost 3 dogs. These dogs are made out to be beloved companions that have gone missing. In reality, they are a trio of summoned creatures that once all are gathered, SCP-Y-8021 will insist you choose one. You have no idea why, but you are compelled to choose one of the companions you helped find. This is when you vanish into thin air without a trace. The Foundation has yet to identify what happens to whoever vanishes or where they go. The only notable thing is that all the names of the companions will change and they all translate to one word: trap. Researchers at the Foundation believe that SCP-Y-8021 takes pleasure in constantly letting its victim know they are in a trap. Little else is known about SCP-Y-8021, and the Foundation has given this SCP the classification of Keter. If you come across this SCP, pray that you are able to continue with what you are doing, lest you fall victim to its next trap. It is one of the harshest environments to face on Earth. In fact, it would be suffice it to say that only the burning heat from a volcano would be worse. That said, you have been sent here by the SCP Foundation into reports of a giant moving glacier that travels across these frozen wastelands. Reports from the few, and we do mean few humans living in this freezing environment, mention a large mountain-like object moving in the distance. Personally, you think this could be one of those times that a hallucination from someone who barely managed to survive this environment became gossip and rumour, leading others to see the same thing. However, as a member of the Foundation, you have no choice but to investigate the incident dubbed SCP-Y-1034-1. Eventually, you start to think you might also expire reaching your destination. Just as you start to feel the fatigue from the harsh environment you're in, you think you see something moving in the distance. Something large. Something that looks like a large spiky rock formation. You can't make it out clearly as your vision starts to blur. It just looks like a large dark mass moving as your eyes close. The next thing you remember is waking up in a hut next to a warm fire. You have no recollection of how you got there. You remember being out in the harsh icy weather and vaguely seeing a large black moving mass. You dismiss this as a blurred vision and seeing whoever came to your aid. As you look around, you can see some hot food. You're starving, and you eat the food without any hesitation. After a while, you feel your strength returning, enough for you to get up and move around the hut. You notice on the side a photo of family. Next to that, an all too familiar symbol. It was the symbol for the SCP Foundation. You let out a sigh of relief as you realize you've made it to your destination. Site 12, a remote Foundation outpost in the harsh frozen environment. After a couple of days' rest, your strength has returned, enough to continue with your mission. You set off with the other agent who rescued you, and you head towards the location sightings of this moving glacier have been reported. After travelling for what seems like hours, you both seem to notice a blizzard picking up, and the temperature started to drop, only by a few degrees at first. However, a few degrees in this frozen wasteland, with nothing around for miles, is all it takes to turn you into a frozen corpse. Despite this, you have no choice but to continue on, as you see something you think moving in the distance. It couldn't be, could it? There really was a moving mountain? As you get closer, you seem to forget about the coldness around you, until you suddenly fall to the ground with your face in the snow. You try and muster the last of your strength to stand up. You fall over on your side, facing the direction of the moving mountain. You lay there, unable to move, unable to feel your extremities, yet not in any pain. In fact, it is almost peaceful. You know there is nothing you can do but watch as you slowly start to get sleepier the closer this mountain got. You barely are able to keep your eyes open, but you must. An hour passes, and you're now frozen and motionless, covered in icicles. Ironically, still alive, although barely, you start to make out the shape of the giant mass as it got closer and closer. Unable to move as the last of your strength faded away, you could make out the shape of a giant dinosaur covered in ice moving about. It was the last sight you would see. After that, you went into a peaceful but endless slumber. You had just come across SCP-Y-1034, the frozen dinosaur. SCP-Y-1034 is a large Brachiosaurus dinosaur that has survived in this harsh frozen environment. Its body, however, is covered in large shards of ice, and despite some areas of broken ice and severe frostbite on parts of this gigantic creature, it was able to move and survive despite temperatures around SCP-Y-1034 dropping to extreme sub-zero temperatures. Temperatures that would be lethal to any other living being. Well, living as we understand it for humans. Due to this, Foundation researchers maintained a distance of no less than 5 kilometers from SCP-Y-1034. This was deemed the maximum safe distance to prevent any severe and long-lasting effects from the cold. Thermal imaging of SCP-Y-1034 showed that any heat in the area around this SCP would be absorbed into its body and the temperature around it would suddenly drop. The Foundation is unsure what causes this effect, although it does make studying SCP-Y-1034 extremely difficult. Due to this, the Foundation has classified SCP-Y-1034 as Euclid. That said, this is only due to the fact that this SCP seems to be content with wandering around the frozen wasteland, with no intention thus far of travelling to other areas. If by some chance SCP-Y-1034 does travel beyond its established borders, due to the ability to absorb the surrounding heat, it will be given the classification of Keter class, and the SCP Foundation will authorize the containment or extermination of SCP-Y-1034 by any means necessary. It has been rumored that this SCP was the cause of the last ice age, and we wouldn't want another one of those, would we? So what do you guys think of today's Yugioh Monsters SCPs? I had a lot of fun on this one, and I quite enjoyed coming up with the story and the lore for each of these SCP counterparts. If there are ever Yugioh Monsters you want to see as SCPs, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, why not check out some of the other SCP related content on the channel? We've got Venomizing SCPs, we've got more Yugioh Monsters SCPs. Monday is going to be a live stream, and I'm thinking of doing something Spider-Man related. Haven't really done any of that on the channel before. I'm a big fan of Spider-Man, and the new movie's just come out. Stay safe everybody. Catch you next time.